How do we Jews tell our story? Story of who we are. We tell the stories of our successes. We talk about our poets, our novelists, our actors, our writers. We speak about our brilliant doctors. We talk about our lawyers, our finance professionals. Yes, even now we talk about our finance professionals. We talk about our scientists. In fact, so many Jews have won Nobel Prizes that it's not really even news anymore. We just kind of nod our heads and say, oh, there's another one. Our place in the world when we tell our story is of a people who have the ability to influence politics of countries, especially in this country, the most powerful in the world. And we tell the story of the Jewish homeland of Israel, of a miraculous return to rebuild a land that was desolate, of deserts that our people have made bloom, of technological accomplishments beyond measure. We tell even of an ancient language that was not spoken commonly between people that we as a people restored. We tell the story of might, of power that Jews have never, ever had before because of that land. And of course, we tell the story of suffering. We tell the story of the death camps in Europe, of families torn apart, of childhoods shattered, of entire communities erased forever. We tell the stories of suffering and pogroms in Russia. We know that Fiddler on the Roof, while quaint, romanticizes what was really a miserable time for our people in those frozen towns. Looking way back into history, we tell of the devastation of a people exiled, of a great and glorious temple built by King Solomon in a city that David created, destroyed, its people carted off to distant lands. We tell the story of another temple, of the larger, even grander sister of the first temple, so mighty, built so well that parts of its walls still stand for us. It was partially and only partially reduced to rubble by the Romans. And then we tell the story of our people that were dispersed for 2,000 years. And we tell the story of our wandering. And that's our oldest story and our newest story. Because all the stories that we tell, all the other stories, are framed by the wandering of our people. From the moment that Abraham and Sarah left the land of their birth, we've been strangers in far more lands and for far more years than we've ever lived on the soil that was promised to Abraham and Sarah and their progeny for eternity. We have been gerim, strangers in strange lands. We've been toshavim, guests, never fully at home. We've spoken countless foreign languages. We've bowed to countless foreign rulers. We've fought the wars on behalf of countless nations. And yet, in that story of wandering, we can tell about how we've never lost our distinctiveness, how we've always managed to maintain our unique identity, even as we've been influenced by the cultures that we've adopted. But whether we're a Jew from China, India, Ethiopia, Brazil, we recognize each other because we discover that there's some kind of a spiritual kinship, that we have a bond that exists like no people on earth, and that's part of our story of wandering as well. So tonight, I want to focus on the lessons that we glean from our wandering. And I want to ask you a question. And I'm going to frame the question by stories throughout the service, our reflections on our wandering. But I want to frame it with this question. How does our own story of wandering influence our response as a community to the immigrants, those who are documented and those who might be undocumented, that dwell among us today? What does it mean to be a Jew in a country that was founded on the principle of opening its arms to wanderers? And we begin with a prayer, the Baruch Hu. Tonight, not only is it a call to prayer, but I'd like to suggest that it is a call to attention and a call to challenge and a call specifically tonight to wrestle with that most basic question of what our wandering means. When Jewish families sit around the Passover table and tell the story of Israelite slavery in Egypt, how many recognize that they're fulfilling a command that is 3,000 years old? And that it's our answer to a couple of sentences in the Torah. The Torah says, when, in the time to come, your children ask you, what mean the laws, decrees, and rules that the Lord our God has enjoined upon you, you shall say to your children, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. Now, the Bible mentions Israelite slavery dozens, if not even hundreds of times. But it doesn't describe one speck of the Seder that we've come to recognize as being the Passover observance. It doesn't mention a Haggadah. It knows nothing about bitter herbs, charoset, the four questions, or most of the symbols that we know as Passover. But it places, and this it does so successfully that we're still talking about it, it places the story of leaving Egypt right at the center of Jewish consciousness. And so when the rabbi sat down, now leap forward 1,000 years, we're talking 2,000 years ago, and they thought about how to fulfill the Torah's command, they wanted to make sure that the experience of redemption and the experience of wandering wouldn't exist as some distant memory that happened to them back then. It should always feel, the rabbi said, to us like it was yesterday. And they told us to say at our Passover Seder, Avadim chayinu leFaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. The rabbis made sure that it was personal, not our ancestors, but us. And they gave us the gift of the Passover Seder because they wanted to be sure that every year we'd experience the joy of freedom, we'd experience the power of liberation, we'd experience the exaltation of nationhood. And they also wanted to make sure that our joy should never be so intoxicating that we forget the dark side of the story. They wanted to make sure that wherever and whenever we live, and no matter how comfortable we are, we always sense the taste of oppression, the bitter herbs. We always suffer the pain of homelessness. We always endure the terror of our people's subjugation. And we always relive the trauma of what it is to be a powerless slave. See, the rabbis demanded of us in Passover that we never become so smug in our freedom and in our prosperity that we'd forget what it is to be a wanderer, forget what it is to be an immigrant in pursuit of life's promises. And the Torah commands time and again, V'ger lo tilchatz, v'atem yidatem et nefesh hager, ki gerim ha'item be'eretz Mitzrayim. You shall not wrong a stranger, for you know the hearts of the stranger, the Torah says. You yourselves have been strangers in the land of Egypt. And so, in our service, we sing the song of liberation and joy and a song of uplift to a melody that picks us up. And it's much more meaningful, this prayer and this song, because the taste of slavery never quite leaves us because of Passover. So to enrich our prayers this evening, and to enrich the intentionality that we bring to our service and our worship, the screen is going to drop behind me, and you'll see images of Jews from many of the places that we've lived, many of the places that we've wandered at all the corners